Lord Crispin Vale watched from the shadow of the gatehouse arch as the woman below him broke into his castle with a hairpin and a carpenter's mallet, and he understood immediately that she had been living there for some time, because she knew exactly which door to strike and where. She was perhaps 30 years of age, dark-haired, moving with the particular efficiency of someone who had long since stopped waiting for help. She carried a lantern in one hand and a basket in the other, and when the lock gave way, she caught the door before it could swing and wake anyone. Though there was no one to wake, or so she believed. She stepped inside as if she owned the place. In a manner of speaking, Crispin supposed, she did. He had been gone 51 years. He had come back because the solicitors in Vienna had begun sending letters to his London address, which meant someone had noticed the estate was occupied without lease or deed, and he could not afford that kind of attention. He had not come back because he wanted to. Vale Castle sat in the upland country of Bohemia, like a tooth left too long in a jaw, technically present, functionally useless, and occasionally painful. He had abandoned it in 1829 after the business with the Vale Council, and he had intended to abandon it permanently. And yet here was a woman with a mallet and a basket, walking through his great hall with the lantern swinging at her side, and he found that he could not simply announce himself and demand she leave. Not yet. He followed her at a distance, keeping to the upper gallery, watching. She set the basket on the long refectory table, his table, the one his grandmother had brought from Florence in 1601, and began unpacking it. Bread. A jar of something preserved. A small cloth bundle that turned out to contain a child's wooden horse. She placed the horse at the end of the table with the careful deliberateness of someone arranging a sacred object, and then she sat down and put her face in her hands. She did not weep. She simply sat there with her face covered, breathing, in the way that people breathe when they are trying to remember why they started. Crispin had not felt anything in a very long time. He was not sure what he felt now. But he stayed in the gallery and did not announce himself, and the night settled around both of them like snow around a stopped clock. Her name, he would learn, was Marta Sabo. She had been a schoolteacher in the village of Vale under Keld before the schoolhouse burned, an accident of a candle left too close to a curtain, and she had lost her position along with the building because the village council had decided that a schoolteacher who allowed such a thing to happen was not a schoolteacher they wished to keep. She had appealed. She had written letters. She had presented 3 years of impeccable records and 12 testimonials from parents whose children could now read. The council had thanked her and declined. The child was her nephew, Oscar, aged 7, whose parents had gone to Prague 2 winters ago and not returned. She did not know precisely what had happened to them. The solicitor's letter had been brief and final. She had taken Oscar in without discussion, as one takes in rain, not because one wants it, but because one cannot in good conscience leave it outside. With no schoolhouse and a child to feed and the village's charity wearing thin, she had done the only practical thing she could think of. She had moved into the abandoned castle on the hill, which no one had claimed in living memory, and she had begun to make it habitable. She had cleaned 3 rooms. She had repaired the kitchen hearth. She had planted a kitchen garden in the south courtyard where the walls blocked the wind, and she had taught Oscar his letters on the flagstones with a piece of chalk. Crispin observed all of this across 3 nights before she saw him. He had been careful. He was always careful. But on the 3rd night, Oscar woke at 2 in the morning and wandered into the gallery looking for the privy, and he walked directly into Crispin in the dark and said, with great composure, "You are very cold." "Yes," Crispin said, because there was nothing else to say. "Are you a ghost?" "No." Oscar considered this. Aunt Marta said there might be bats. "There are bats," Crispin confirmed. "In the East Tower, they are not dangerous." "I know bats aren't dangerous," Oscar said, with the particular scorn of a child who has been underestimated. "I meant she said there might be something else." He was still debating how to answer this when the lantern appeared at the end of the gallery, and Marta Sabo came around the corner with her hair unbound and a fire iron in her hand, and she stopped. She looked at Crispin. She looked at the fire iron. She looked at Oscar, who was standing between them with the expression of a child who has found something interesting and intends to keep it. "Oscar," she said very quietly, "go back to the room." "But, now, please." He went, with the reluctance of someone leaving a theater during the best scene. Marta did not lower the fire iron. "This is private property," she said. "Yes," Crispin said. "It is mine." The silence that followed was the kind that rearranges furniture. She held the iron steady. Her eyes, dark, direct, the color of strong tea, moved across him with the schoolteacher's assessment, cataloging, filing, deciding. He was aware that he did not look entirely like a man who had walked up from the village. He was aware that he had not eaten in 4 days, and that this showed in ways he could not entirely disguise. "You are Lord Vale," she said finally. It was not a question. "I am." The solicitors said the estate had been unclaimed for over 50 years. "The solicitors were not wrong. I have been elsewhere." "You don't look 50 years older than the portrait in the dining room," she said. He said nothing. She lowered the fire iron, not because she had decided he was safe, but because she had decided something else. He could see it in the set of her mouth, the slight forward lean of her posture. She had decided to be practical. It was, he would come to understand, her primary response to the impossible. "I cannot leave tonight," she said. "Oscar is asleep, and it is 2 in the morning, and we have nowhere to go before dawn. I will leave in the morning. I apologize for the trespass." "You repaired the kitchen hearth," Crispin said. "It was in poor condition." "And planted a garden." "The south courtyard has good drainage." She paused. "I intended to pay rent if I could establish who owned the property. I kept accounts." He looked at her for a long moment. She looked back. The lantern between them made the gallery into something almost warm. "Don't leave in the morning," he said. "I need to think." "About what?" "About what comes next," he said. "For all of us." He had not meant to say all of us. The words arrived without his permission, as some words do when a person has been alone too long. Marta Sabo studied him with those schoolteacher's eyes, and she did not say yes and she did not say no. She said, "There is bread in the kitchen. You look as though you have not eaten." "I don't eat bread," Crispin said. "Then you should tell me what you do eat," she said, "so that I know what to prepare." She turned and walked back toward the kitchen, and after a moment, because he had no better option, and because the alternative was standing alone in the gallery for the rest of the night, he followed her. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table while the fire rebuilt itself from her careful tending, and she asked him questions with the methodical patience of someone conducting an examination. How long had he owned the castle? Why had he left? What were his intentions now? He answered the ones he could and deflected the ones he couldn't, and she noted every deflection without comment, which was somehow more unsettling than if she had pressed. He told her she and Oscar could remain until she found other arrangements. He told her he would stay in the East Wing, which she had not yet cleaned, and which suited him for reasons he did not explain. He told her that he would not interfere with her routines. "And what are your routines?" she asked. "I am awake at night," he said. "I sleep during the day." "Like a bat," she said, and the corner of her mouth moved in a way that was not quite a smile, but was adjacent to one. "Somewhat," he said. She poured herself a cup of tea from the pot she had set to steep. She did not offer him one, because he had told her he did not eat, and she was the kind of person who listened. She held the cup in both hands and looked at him over the rim, and she said, "You knew me before, didn't you?" He went very still. 12 years ago," she said. "In the village. There was a night in October. I had gone out to look for my father's dog, who had gotten loose, and I fell in the ravine near the mill. I was stuck for nearly an hour. Someone helped me out. It was dark and I could not see his face, but he spoke German with a very old accent and his hands were cold. He set my ankle and carried me to the road and was gone before I could thank him." Crispin said nothing. "That was you," she said. "You had a sprained ankle," he said finally, "and a very foolish dog." "His name was Benedek," she said, "and he was not foolish. He was enthusiastic." The not quite smile again. "I thought about that night for a long time. I thought I had imagined it." "You hadn't." "No," she said. "I can see that now." The fire settled. Outside, the Bohemian uplands were dark and still and smelled of pine resin and coming frost. Crispin sat across from a woman who had just calmly identified him from a 12-year-old memory, who had a child asleep in his castle and chalk drawings on his flagstones and accounts kept in a small leather book against the day she might need to prove she had meant no harm, and he thought that 51 years of absence had not prepared him for this at all. The arrangement, such as it was, held for 3 weeks. Crispin kept to the East Wing by day. Marta taught Oscar his letters in the mornings and spent her afternoons cataloging the castle's contents with a thoroughness that both impressed and alarmed him. She had found, among other things, a locked chest in the library that she had not opened but had noted in her accounts as contents unknown, possibly significant. In the evenings, she left supper in the kitchen for herself and Oscar, and she left a covered dish outside his door, which was empty in the morning, though it never contained bread. She did not ask what was in the dish when it came back empty. She simply washed it and left another the next evening. He began cautiously to appear at dinner, not to eat. He sat at the end of the table and drank nothing and ate nothing, and she did not comment on this, though Oscar did, repeatedly, until Marta said that Lord Vale had a delicate constitution, and Oscar accepted this with the same equanimity with which he seemed to accept most things. They talked. This was the thing Crispin had not anticipated, that after 50 years of silence, conversation would feel like a room being aired. She had opinions about the Prussian education system, about the proper management of kitchen gardens in high-altitude conditions, about the collected poems of Lenau, which she considered underrated, and about the structural failings of the castle's south-facing drainage, which she had already begun to address with a redirected channel and a great deal of gravel. He listened to all of it. He found to his own surprise that he had opinions too, about Lenau, about drainage, about the particular quality of winter light in this part of Bohemia that he had not thought about in decades. One evening she brought out a small dulcimer from the basket she had carried on her first night, and she played it with the unself-conscious competence of someone who had played since childhood. It was an old Transylvanian folk instrument, slightly out of tune from the move, and she corrected the tuning by ear before she began, turning the pegs with a focus that reminded him of a watchmaker. The music she played was not elegant. It was warm and repetitive and very old, and it filled the stone hall in a way that nothing had filled it in 50 years. Oscar fell asleep in his chair before the second tune was finished. Marta played on, softly, watching the fire. "You could stay," Crispin said. The words came out before he had examined them. She did not stop playing. "As what?" "As the person who manages this place. There is a great deal to be managed. I am not suited to it." "You mean as a housekeeper?" "I mean as someone with authority over the estate, wages, a proper arrangement." She played another measure before she answered. "I will think about it," she said. But then, 11 days later, the man from the Vale Council arrived, and thinking about it became considerably less relevant. His name was Conrad Suhr, and he was not human, and he knew it, and Marta did not, and the asymmetry of this was immediately dangerous. He arrived at the castle gate on a Tuesday afternoon while Crispin slept, and he presented himself to Marta with a card that identified him as a solicitor from Vienna, and a manner that identified him as something considerably more ancient. Marta brought him into the front parlor and offered him tea, which he declined, and she sat across from him with her account book on her knee, and her posture very straight, because she had learned early that when men came from cities with cards and briefcases, posture was a form of argument. "I represent certain interested parties," Suhr said, "who have a prior claim on the Vale estate." Lord Vale is in residence, Marta said. Any claim on the estate should be directed to him. Lord Vale has been absent for 51 years, Zur said pleasantly. Under the terms of the Vale Compact, which is not a document you would have encountered, Miss Sabo, an estate held in his name reverts to council authority after 50 years of abandonment. I am not familiar with that compact, Marta said. I would need to see it. Of course. He produced a document, old, densely written, sealed with wax in a deep burgundy that had an odd quality to it she could not quite name. You will note the relevant clause on the 3rd page. She read it. She read it again. She said, "This appears to be a private agreement. It has no standing in Austrian civil law." Zur smiled. It was the smile of someone who has never needed civil law. Miss Sabo, he said, I am not here to discuss civil law. I am here to inform you that this property will be transferred within 30 days, and that your presence here, and the child's, will need to be resolved accordingly. Resolved, she said. Relocated, he said, or, and I say this as a courtesy, you might find it useful to remain, as a guarantee of Lord Vale's cooperation. The room was very quiet. Marta looked at the document in her hands and then at Zur, and she understood that he was not threatening her with eviction. He was threatening her with something else entirely, though she could not yet name what. I think, she said, that you should go, and I think you should come back when Lord Vale is available to receive you. I look forward to it, Zur said, and left. Marta sat in the parlor for a long time after the door closed. Then she went to the east wing and knocked on Crispin's door and said through the wood, I need you to wake up. Something has happened. He was at the door in seconds, which told her something. She told him about Zur. She told him about the compact. She showed him the card the man had left, which Crispin took between 2 fingers and looked at with an expression she had not seen on him before. Not fear, exactly, but the particular alertness of someone who has heard a sound they recognize and do not want to hear again. The Vale Council, he said. Who are they? He looked at her. He had been looking at her differently since the night she had identified him from a 12-year-old memory, with the careful attention of someone reassessing a calculation. They are, he said slowly, the reason I left. Then you need to tell me what they are, she said. Because that man was not a solicitor, and whatever that document was, it was not a civil instrument, and I need to understand what I am dealing with. He told her. Not everything, not that night, but enough. He told her about the council, about the compact, about the nature of the obligation he had fled 50 years ago when they had demanded he take a seat among them and exercise authority over the regions. He paused here, choosing words. The region's less visible population. Less visible, she said. Those who live outside the ordinary boundaries, he said. Those who are, like me. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Show me your hands. He did. She took one between both of hers and turned it over, examining it with the same attention she gave to drainage problems and account books. His skin was the temperature of the stone walls. His pulse, if she pressed her fingers to his wrist, was not absent. It was simply very slow, the way a clock runs slow in cold weather. How old are you? She asked. He told her. She set his hand down carefully, as if returning something borrowed. She said, And the night in the ravine. You were there because you were watching over the village. I was passing through, he said. You were watching over the village, she said again, with the certainty of someone who has added up a column twice and gotten the same answer. He did not deny it. And the council wants this estate back because it gives them authority over this region. Over the valley, over the village, he paused, over everyone in it. She stood up and went to the window and looked out at the south courtyard, where her kitchen garden was laid out in careful rows. and where Oscar had drawn a map of an imaginary country on the flagstones in chalk. She stood there long enough that the candle on the table burned down a full inch. Then she turned around and said, "Then we don't let them have it." He looked at her. "I am not a piece to be moved around a board," she said, "and neither is Oscar, and neither, I suspect, are the people in that village. So we need to find out what the compact actually says and whether there is any legitimate challenge to it, and we need to do it before 30 days are up." This was when Crispin understood something he had not understood before, that the 12 years between the night in the ravine and this moment had not been wasted on her. She had become someone formidable. The next morning, while he slept, because she was practical about such things, Marta rode into the village and presented herself at the office of the district notary, a man named Horak, who had served the region for 40 years and who kept records going back considerably further. She told him she needed to understand the legal standing of private compacts as they related to property succession under Austrian law. She did not tell him why. She had brought her account book and her 3 years of impeccable records and her 12 testimonials, because she had learned that paper was a form of armor. Horak was a careful man who liked careful women. He spent 2 hours with her in his codices, and at the end of 2 hours he said that a private compact, however ancient, had no standing against a continuous documented occupancy of more than 6 months under Austrian civil statute, provided the occupant could demonstrate good faith residence and the intent to maintain the property. Marta had 6 months of accounts. She had receipts for gravel and mortar and kitchen supplies. She had a redirected drainage channel. She had a kitchen garden. She had, she realized, been building her case without knowing it. She rode back to the castle with the relevant statutes copied in her neat schoolteacher's hand, and she spread them on the kitchen table. And when Crispin appeared at dusk, she walked him through every page. "This doesn't address the compact directly," he said, reading. "No," she said, "but it addresses the property. If you establish continuous residence, if you formally register your return with the district authority, and I register as a state manager with documented tenure, then the compact's claim of abandonment fails. The estate never was abandoned, it was managed." He looked at the papers. He looked at her. "Sur will not accept this quietly," he said. "I know. He has resources I cannot match in daylight hours." "I know that too," she said. "That is why I am going to file the documents tomorrow morning before he has any opportunity to interfere, and you are going to write the letter of return tonight, and we are going to do this correctly and completely, and on the record." He wrote the letter. She filed the documents, and on the 3rd day after that, Conrad Zur returned to the castle. He did not come alone. He brought 2 others, men or things shaped like men, with the same quality of ancient stillness that Marta had now learned to recognize. They came in the afternoon, when the light was still strong, which told her they were not precisely like Crispin, or that they had found some accommodation with daylight that he had not. Marta met them at the gate. She had sent Oscar to the kitchen with firm instructions to stay there, and she had put on her best dress, not because she was vain, but because she had learned that presentation was argument, and she had the notarized documents in a leather folder under her arm. "Miss Sabo," Sur said, "we have come to finalize the transfer." "There is no transfer to finalize," she said. "Lord Vale has registered his return with the district authority. I have registered as estate manager with documented continuous tenure. The compact's abandonment clause does not apply." Sur's pleasantness did not waver. "Those documents can be challenged." "By whom?" she said. "In what court? Under what statute?" She opened the folder and held out the relevant pages. "I have read the compact, Mr. Sur. All of it, not just the clause you showed me. Page 7 contains a provision that any council claim must be adjudicated by the district civil authority in the presence of both parties. I have already notified Notary Horak that such a claim has been made. He is expecting a formal submission by the end of the week." The 2 men behind Sur exchanged a look. Sur did not move. "You are very thorough," he said. "I am a school teacher," she said. We read the whole document. Lord Vale cannot appear before a civil authority, Zur said. His situation makes that complicated. Lord Vale has provided a written statement, witnessed and sealed, she said, which is legally equivalent under the 1847 statute on absent landholders. She produced this also. She had spent 2 evenings with Horax Codices preparing for exactly this objection. Behind her, she heard the castle door open. She did not turn around because she had agreed with Crispin that he would appear only if necessary. The afternoon light was not kind to him, and she had not wanted to use that card before she had to. But apparently he had decided the moment had come. He walked to her side and stood there, and the quality of the afternoon changed in the way that it changes when something very old and very certain enters a space. He was wearing his best coat, which she had found in a trunk, and aired and pressed herself, and he looked, not precisely human, but not precisely not either. He looked like someone who had been here a very long time and intended to continue. Conrad, he said. Crispin, Zur said, and for the first time the pleasantness slipped, just slightly, like a rug on a polished floor. The documents are in order, Crispin said. The claim fails. I would suggest you take that to the council and save everyone the inconvenience of a civil proceeding, which will create a record that none of us want. A long silence. The upland wind moved through the courtyard, carrying the smell of Marta's kitchen garden, rosemary and turned earth and the faint sweetness of the last autumn herbs. This is not finished, Zur said. No, Crispin said. But it is finished for today. Zur looked at Marta, a long, assessing look that she returned without flinching, because she had met school inspectors who were more frightening. And then he turned and walked away, and the 2 men followed him, and the gate closed, and the courtyard was quiet. Marta let out a slow breath. Then she said, You were supposed to stay inside. You had been standing there for 20 minutes, Crispin said. I was watching from the window. I had it in hand. You did, he said. Entirely. I came because I wanted to, not because you needed me to. She looked at him. He was standing in the afternoon light, which was doing him no favors. His face was too pale, and his eyes were too dark, and he was clearly uncomfortable in ways he was trying not to show. She had seen him like this before, and she had begun to understand what it cost him. Go inside, she said. I'll bring tea. I don't drink tea. I know, she said. It's for me. But you can sit with me while I drink it. He went inside. She followed. And in the kitchen, where the hearth she had repaired was burning steadily, and the chalk map of Oscar's imaginary country was visible through the window on the flagstones outside, they sat across from each other at the table, and she poured her tea and he watched her and the afternoon light moved slowly across the floor between them. The council will try again, he said. Probably, she said. Zur is patient. He has been patient for a very long time. So have I, she said. Different kind of patience, but it amounts to the same thing. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, The compact has another provision. One I did not show you. She set down her cup. If the estate is held jointly, he said, by a member of the council's register and a human partner, bound by formal covenant, the compact's authority over the estate is permanently nullified. It was written as a punishment clause originally, to prevent members from choosing human alliances over council loyalty. He paused. It was never used, no one ever chose. She looked at him for a long time. The fire settled. Outside, Oscar's voice floated up from somewhere in the south courtyard, narrating something to himself in the absorbed way of children who have invented a world. A formal covenant, she said. A marriage, he said, under civil law and under the older law, both. And what does the older law require? He met her eyes. That both parties choose freely. That the human partner understands what they are choosing. And that... He stopped. Tell me all of it, she said. That the bond is permanent, he said. Not, not transformation, not what you might be imagining, but permanent, binding in ways that civil law doesn't cover. You would be tied to this place, to me, for as long as you live, and after. After, she said. The bond extends, he said carefully, beyond ordinary time. It is not something I can explain fully in terms that it means I would not die, she said. Not in the ordinary way, not on the ordinary schedule. He looked at his hands. I am not asking you. I am telling you it exists, because you deserve to know all the instruments available. It is not a solution I would put forward. Why not? He looked up. Because it is a great deal to ask of someone. You have a life. You have Oscar to raise. You have... I have 3 rooms I cleaned in an abandoned castle, she said, and a kitchen garden and an account book, and nowhere else to go. She said it without self-pity, as a simple accounting of facts. I am not saying yes. I am saying, don't decide for me what is too much to ask. He said nothing. I need to think, she said. And you need to go rest, because you look terrible, and I need you functional if Sur comes back. He almost smiled. It was the closest she had seen him come to it. You are remarkably practical, he said. I am a school teacher, she said. We manage with what we have. She thought for 6 days. She thought while she taught Oscar his letters, and while she tended the kitchen garden, and while she played her dulcimer in the evenings, and while she lay awake in the room she had claimed and listened to the castle breathe around her. She thought about what she was giving up, which was modest, a village that had dismissed her, a profession she could rebuild elsewhere, a future that was perfectly adequate and perfectly colorless. She thought about what she was choosing, which was not modest at all. A man who had watched over a valley for a century without being asked, who had carried her out of a ravine on a dark October night and disappeared before she could thank him, who sat at her table every evening and said nothing and listened to everything and looked at her like she was something he had not expected to find. She thought about Oscar, most carefully of all. She sat with him one afternoon and said, "How would you feel about living here always?" He looked up from his chalk map. With Lord Vale? Yes. He considered this with the seriousness he brought to all important questions. He knows where the bats are, he said, and he doesn't talk too much. I think that's good. I think so too, she said. On the 7th day she went to the east wing at dusk, before Crispin had fully risen, and she knocked on the door, and when he opened it she said, I have conditions. He stood aside to let her in. The room was spare and cold and very clean. He kept it immaculate, she had noticed, in the way of someone who has lived with disorder and chosen against it. He sat in the single chair and she stood by the window, and she told him her conditions. Oscar would be provided for completely, educated properly, given every opportunity she had been denied. The estate would be managed transparently, with accounts she kept and he reviewed. She would continue to teach. The village needed a school, and if they would not give her the old position, she would establish one here, in the castle, for any child whose parents would send them. And she would not pretend, to anyone, that this was something other than what it was. She would not perform a fiction. Those are not conditions, Crispin said. Those are plans. Yes, she said. I make plans. It is what I do. Do you agree to them? Entirely, he said. Then yes, she said. To the covenant. To all of it. He looked at her for a long moment, and then he said very quietly, You understand what you are choosing. I understand that I am choosing this place, she said, and this work, and you. She paused. I am choosing the bats in the east tower and the drainage problem in the south courtyard, and the locked chest in the library that I still haven't opened. I am choosing all of it. He stood up. He was very still in the way that he was always still. The stillness of something that has stopped measuring time in ordinary increments. He reached out and took her hand, and she let him. And his hand was